I see that we've got a couple of recent executive orders that we should take a look at here. Can you lead us through those?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring this to our listeners' attention just because this illustrates what we've been talking about, that this total control, surveillance, technocratic system, however you want to call it, it's happening and it's happening quickly. And these executive orders are maybe less than 2 weeks old. The first one I want to touch on real quick is establishing the task force to eliminate fraud. And I saw the title and I went, oh, I bet I know what this means. Guess what it does. So it's talking about this task force that's going to coordinate and accelerate a comprehensive national strategy to stop fraud, waste, and abuse within federal benefits programs, including programs administered jointly with state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. I thought that was interesting because it's not just a federal level, it goes to every levels of government.
Okay.
So they are tasked with coordinating member agency efforts to adopt minimum anti-fraud requirements for transactions and processes. And on the face of this looks good. Hey, we're going to stop fraud, waste, and abuse. This is wonderful. But what are they really saying? Well, the anti-fraud requirements may include screening, proof of identity, and eligibility verification. So what is this? Digital ID, the real ID. This is exactly what they're bringing. And they're bringing it in the guise of, this is great. We're going to get rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. Well, yes, it may a little bit, but it's going to enslave us. So I wanted to bring that one to our listeners' attention. And the other one was promoting access to mortgage credit. So I thought this was interesting because we keep hearing about how you're going to own nothing and be happy. You're not going to own your home. You're not going to own your cars, that kind of thing. So I thought, well, I'm going to take a look at it and see what's in there. Well, there was a little gold nugget in there. So it's about digital mortgage modernization. It calls for the Secretary of Agriculture, HUD, VA, and the Director of the FHFA to consider eliminating unnecessary wet signature requirements for disclosures, applications, closing documents, and similar documents. So that's basically saying in person.
Yeah,
Like what?
there's no wet. They're talking about eliminating that.
Right. Yeah. Standardizing acceptance of electronic signatures, e-notes, and remote online notarization.
Which is just bogus to me. Okay. Well, has anybody actually ever gone through this process? Personally, I interface with this in my work life.
Sure.
Where they want signatures. I just recently had a contract. Oh, and they send me a DocuSign and I say, thank you very much. Will you accept a wet signature? Fax me the document. I'll print it. I'll wet sign it. I'll securely upload it to your thing. And yes, they do. That's something that I think many people don't realize. I've done it at the bank as well, where, yeah, isn't this so convenient? They send this thing over and you can just DocuSign it, blah, blah, blah. I just think it's hilarious because how do they know that's me who's clicking the button? They don't. So they're actually promoting a system to create the ability for fraud. So they can then have the solution down and bring in the solution that we can't trust that. So you've got to scan your iris or your thumbprint or something like that. So yes, they're actually creating, we already know this. Your audience already knows this. Peter, the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah.
We've got a solution. So we have to create a problem.
Because we want the solution to be in place.
Yeah.
And I think a key word you used earlier is convenience. That's the siren's call. Is convenience on every level. It's convenient to have your phone. It's convenient to check your email on your phone. I work somewhere now, I no longer am a wine store, where I have literally had people come up to me and say, my whole phone was wiped, my whole phone was hacked, my calendar disappeared. Like it's crazy. And I'm seeing more and more that everything is being consolidated onto these phones. And it's the siren call, convenience. That's going to be our downfall. But getting back, so the last point in this mortgage credit executive order is promoting digital mortgage standards. There you go. They're digitalizing mortgages so that they can be put on the blockchain and you're not going to own it. So this is happening. This is happening in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting when you were talking about doing the wet signatures and mortgages that the Association of Realtors is an association that started pushing this
Mhm.
Of course.
very far. Right.
FOMO, man.
Yeah.
FOMO, baby. Fear of missing out. And everybody's on this train of like, everybody's doing it, so we have to.
Mm-hmm. And they start pushing it, and then it becomes normalized.
Again, creating a huge opportunity for fraud for them to come in and fix.
Yes, with the digital ID.
Yep. Absolutely.
Uh-huh. And so many people are, I actually pointed out to someone who gave me their driver's license, and it said not for federal purposes. Federal, what does it say? Not for federal use purposes or whatever. It said, oh, wow, you don't have the real ID. What? Oh my gosh, I thought I did. Am I going to be in trouble? And
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and it's scary that there are so many people out there that don't understand what's happening and why. They obviously believed a narrative.
Yeah.
That they had to have it.
Right.
Okay.
And while we're still on this topic of automation and so on, let's talk a little bit about some recent developments with AI law enforcement.
Yeah, surveillance infrastructure is being built up like crazy right now. We have so many flock cameras in Pima County. I mean, just everywhere around the US. And I'm sure this is happening globally too, because I doubt we're the only ones. They're using AI to scan all the data. And law enforcement is using these AI systems to catch criminals. So they get a picture of someone from a security camera and they run it through facial recognition that AI runs. And, oh, it's a match. Well, there's been many cases where it isn't. And I wanted to just bring up this one case that was semi-recent where there was a bank heist, a lady in Fargo, North Dakota. Yeah. The cops got a grainy surveillance photo to run through an AI recognition software program, and it matches to a woman in Tennessee who's never been on a plane. Yes. Yes. And they literally came and arrested her and sent her to Fargo to face charges. She sat in jail for months.
Yeah.
And no one bothered to check to see if that was really her. They just relied on an AI program to say, oh, yeah, that's her. This is literally what's happening.
Well, there's an analog to this with the very beginning of the most recent Iran war. There was a school of girls that was bombed, and I think they killed over 200 girls. And what ultimately looks like ended up happening there is that it was an AI targeting mistake. That school happened to be next to a target that would have been considered to be an official target, and AI essentially directed the bombing to the girls' school next door. And so that was an example of AI making a quote unquote innocent mistake that ended up
Being devastating.
being devastating. But it also provides reason for people to escape accountability.
I was going to say accountability because I'm seriously, this isn't pointed at you, Terra, but about the story itself. It's like, seriously, there wasn't a detective. I know if Terra Radliff was the detective, what would have happened in that situation?
Yeah.
She would have verified the information. This woman has never been here. This cannot be used as evidence.
Exactly.
So where was the accountability for the people who did that?
Exactly. And she has a couple good lawyers fighting for her. I'll share the link, but it's just sad. And this is what it's going to come down to. I think a lot of this kind of stuff, the stuff with politicians, like the Epstein stuff, a lot of this is being used to put this narrative in the back of their minds. We can't trust politicians. We need something better, something that can't be bribed. Oh, wait, AI. We need AI governance. And I think that's where it's leading. God, I hope I'm wrong.
Yeah.
No, it is exactly. And you had mentioned that AI is technically neutral. It's neither good nor bad.
If
Right.
that's programmed.
Which is the gun argument. People make that argument about guns. Guns are neither good nor bad. It depends on who's holding the gun and their intention.
Off the table, it's not going to go off.
But one of the things I don't like about that argument is it's extremely naive to the reality of the situation, that the people holding the gun or using the AI in this situation are never really going to be the people who are working in our best interest. They're just not. And in fact, the technology is being developed by the people who are ultimately looking to harm us rather than help us.
And
Agreed.
a gun isn't autonomous.
Mhm.
And we're creating this sort of machine learning general AI. I'm not sure what the actual verbiage is, but greater than that.
Right.
Not simply sitting there,
Mhm.
not making decisions. It's technocrats' actual goal for it to be autonomous
Right.
above an individual. So it's quickly not even equating to that gun argument where it's not neutral.
Mhm.
It really isn't neutral.
And I wish I remembered the article that I read, but I remember reading that some AI figure was actually getting personhood being granted.
Oh,
A few years ago, there was a
Yeah.
robot in Saudi Arabia that
Right.
was granted citizenship.
yeah, I think that did come up, and I happened to mention at the time Sophia. Sophia has been given,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes.
and that was, I think, 2015 or something like
Yeah,
that.
it was a while ago. It was
been-
COVID.
Yes.
Okay.
And so
This is the same thing in a way with corporations. Corporations being granted personhood, which was the beginning, I think, of the slippery slope that's led to today.
yeah,
Because now we're looking at granting basically processors equivalents with sentient human beings. Because ultimately, artificial intelligence, I am one of the people who believes it will never be actually conscious or sentient.
Right.
It can mimic it because of its sophistication. But when we grant it rights equivalent to sentient, conscious entities, then we're opening a huge Pandora's box.
Yeah, that's dangerous territory.
I don't know. I think the Pandora's box is already open, Peter.
Why not? No, it is. It's just that we're forcing it wider and wider.
Yeah.
Well, so on that note, let's begin going back and looking at lockdowns. Because if you're listening to us right now and you thought we were done with lockdowns, we're sorry. We apologize.
Lockdowns again?
Well, and this is really funny because there have been people talking about this for a few weeks at this point. With what is going on with the Iran situation. And there have been people who have basically been alerting us to the possibility that we may be entering into a new set of lockdowns. The technical reason for them is different. They're not to contain the spread of disease, as with the COVID lockdowns. They are to ration energy, but ultimately the net result and the way that they look is going to be very similar.
Yes. So start thinking ahead. How are you going to deal with this, listener? These are lockdowns again, period. It's taking away your freedom.
Well, the ultimate goal is disempowering people, breaking them up, severing the ties of human contact, and making people ultimately unable to rely on their own abilities and therefore necessarily having to rely on the government.
More and more dependence. And I certainly don't hope that I'm right, but I foresee that it will be a dual lockdown. I think that there will be some sort of what they will describe as a pandemic.
There's a new COVID variant in the
New
news.
COVID, as more and more people have chosen not to vaccinate, there will be a resurgence in some childhood diseases, which we've always made the point of, or like I have, that it's nothing to be afraid of. But you can't tell me that's not going to be used as a weapon against us, because I don't think they have sealed the deal on that pandemic lockdown. And so then we have an energy lockdown. I think it's going to be a double down.
Yeah, no, I think so too. The other thing also is that unlike the COVID lockdowns that were really largely a bunch of smoke and mirrors, the energy lockdowns are going to have a bit more reality. to back them because of what is happening with the Strait of Hormuz. We'll talk about that. And I think there are still some smoke and mirrors, because I was listening to Christian Eastbrook a couple of days ago talk about some accounts where there were captains of oil tankers that were complaining that they were carrying a cargo but not allowed to unload it. So it's not necessarily even the fact that people are not being allowed to load oil and to transport it. That is actually still happening. We're being shown a situation where we're being told that it is being constricted. And to a certain point, I think it is, but not as much as they're saying, but they're creating a situation artificially of scarcity.
Fuel shortages.
Right. But nevertheless, the situation on the ground is such that because of this war that is going on with Iran in the Middle East, actual oil fields are being attacked, processing infrastructure is being dismantled, natural gas infrastructure is being disabled. And so to a certain degree, that is creating actual scarcity that is going to be used to then motivate these lockdowns and austerity measures. And Terra, what are some of the ones that we're looking at?
So countries like Vietnam and Denmark are urging their citizens to stay home to conserve gas. Slovenia recently announced it's going to be limiting fuel purchases. Sri Lanka is switching to a QR code-based system to ration fuel sales.
So they can keep track of people and make sure they're not double dipping.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
South Korea is going to limit access to roads by license plate number due to the energy crisis.
And what that looks like is that you look at the final digit on your license plate. If it's even, you are allowed to drive on even numbered days. If it's odd, you drive on odd numbered days.
Well, how are you going to keep your job?
Well, so what did we start to work out during the COVID lockdowns?
You must
Honestly.
work from home.
Yeah, right, exactly, because you're not going to be able to drive to work, at least not as often as you would do normally.
But that doesn't work for a huge percentage of the population who have to be in store. Like, what about restaurants and clothing stores or doctor's offices?
You know what we could already speculate about? We might speculate that if you work for big companies, it'll be accepted.
Essential.
Yeah, if you work for
essential.
if you're an essential worker, if you work for Costco, for example, you do get to drive. But if you own a mom and pop shop, you're out of luck. You don't get to drive to work that day. And so
This makes sense.
because you can use exactly the same argument. And I'm predicting that's what's going to happen here.
Oh, I believe it. The prices are almost $4.50 a gallon in some places around Tucson right now. That's crazy.
Well, compared to what, for the listening audience who doesn't live here, what's our norm?
Well, it depends, but it's been in the low threes for a long time.
Or even sometimes in the upper twos, right? Yeah.
So let's see, around the world, some other energy lockdowns. Pakistan is closing schools to save fuel, and they're pushing universities to online classes. Half of the Dutch fleet is idle now as the European fishing industry is hit with high diesel fuel prices.
So that's going to impact food supply.
Absolutely. The National Fisheries Association of Thailand estimated that more than 1,000 boats have already been forced to stay in port, and half the fleet of around 9,000 vessels could soon be idled if this situation drags on.
Yes.
So then what you were talking about earlier, the engineered fuel shortages, this happened in Australia. So BP, the oil company, instructed their contracted fuel wholesalers to limit customer orders that go to gas stations by 50%. So then the mainstream media is telling everyone to go fuel up because prices are going to go up, get the gas while it's cheap. And then the Australian premier holds a press conference and says, quote, "We need to ration fuel because we're running out of fuel," unquote. So now they're rolling out rations, but this is engineered.
Poor Australia. Hard every lockdown.
For everything, aren't they?
Unfortunately, I have a family member who lives there too. The European nations, they're starting to ration fuel, even as barge captains, like you said earlier, are reporting they're not allowed to unload fuel onto the European continent. So this is creating this engineered fuel shortage.
Yes.
Britain is requiring solar panels and heat pumps in all new houses now. This is just reactionary to.
Well, and that supports what we've said before, where we're seeing this bifurcation where more and more people are being moved on to the green energy while the good stuff is being reserved for the machine economy.
Yeah, exactly. So Egypt, they've imposed curfews. They've ordered shops and restaurants and shopping malls to close at 9 to conserve energy. Vietnam suspended some domestic air travel due to the energy crisis. And then I thought this was interesting. A couple of weeks ago, the UN Climate Secretary told Reuters that, quote, the distribution to energy markets caused by the Iran war is a lesson on the risks of relying on fossil fuels, which should drive governments to wean their economies off oil and gas faster. Really?
Mm-hmm.
And then lastly, I wanted to just talk about the Philippines. They declared a national emergency, instituting emergency allocation plan and other energy conservation measures. So this green energy thing is really being pushed.
Well, and that's something we talked a lot in our first season
Yeah.
under Agenda 2030.
Absolutely.
And sustainable development. And
Yep.
it's so interesting to see that actually being implemented now under not necessarily liberal government.
So let me close out by reminding everyone how we started. Technocracy is a resource-based economic system that uses energy as its accounting system. All consumption would be automatically limited by issuing to all citizens a quota of energy certificates.
Yeah. And that's what I see, the blockchain, the digital currency, everything on the digital platform, the data centers, it's all based on energy.
So let's continue on this topic and talk a little bit about the control of the Strait of Hormuz, since that is something that is going to be important in the narrative that's being constructed for these coming lockdowns.
Oh, yeah. Because that's the cause of all this. Ostensibly, the oil's not being let through, but it's much more than that.
No. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Strait of Hormuz. What are we seeing here?
So it's not just about oil.
Yeah.
And I wanted to focus a little bit on food.
Okay.
Because 25% of nitrogen trade goes through the strait. And of course, that's going to mean higher urea prices, which is one of the components to make fertilizer. And that's going to create higher food prices.
Well, and that's going to end up leading us toward food scarcity. And we've discussed in previous episodes how there's a war on food in other ways. They've been attacking farmers and farmland around the world in some of the biggest breadbaskets globally. So the Ukraine is being devastated, and it provides a lot of the world's food. The Netherlands farmers have been under attack in the last couple of years. In the United States, the Trump administration has been doing weird things like importing Argentinian beef to the detriment of our local farmers. And then we've talked about the carbon capture pipelines, which are also being used to take farmland through eminent domain. And in the meantime, going back to our first season again, we've got all of this technology involving artificial food, 3D printed meat, for example, synthetic food, bioengineered food that is waiting in the wings to be brought in as soon as we start running out of natural food.
Don't forget the bugs.
Yeah, absolutely. Bug products, right?
Yes.
And that's something that's been a slow burning topic. So people have been warning about it, but it's been something that's easy to forget as other things come to fore in the news cycle. But what we're seeing right now is the first example of a real food crisis.
Oh, yeah.
That is
It's the ball rolling.
Yeah, this definitely gets the ball rolling so that the government can start creating dependency again by people on government provided food products.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, what's going on in India?
So India is the world's largest importer of urea. And several Indian fertilizer companies have shut down plants or brought forward their annual maintenance schedules after the supplies of, now get this, liquefied natural gas, which is the key raw material used to make urea, when it was cut off because of the Strait of Hormuz and the quote unquote war with Iran. One, ew. that's what's fertilizing our crops. So I think that's just another whole topic. But two, this is like getting the ball rolling where, okay, now we're going to have a huge shortage of fertilizer that our farmers have artificially become dependent on or made to be dependent on. And once you shut these plants down, you can't just bring them back up. There's like a process. So if they're shut down, it could take a month or two to get them back online. So this is not just a short-term problem.
And I see we've also got an article linked here about Australia planting less wheat as the global fertilizer woes deepen.
One of the new hot topics I see is global food security and the quote-unquote solution. I found an article that talks about the International Platform of Insects for Food and Feed. Have you heard of this?
No, not by that name.
They're feeding my chickens. I'm okay with that. They eat insects. I don't.
Well, they have announced a partnership with Argenta, which aims at accelerating the development of regulatory approval of insect-based products for animal health, feed, and human nutrition markets.
Okay, so we're right back to Agenda 2030 there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they're saying, quote, with increased pressure on global supply chains and sustainability targets, insect-derived ingredients are gaining attention as a scalable and resource-efficient alternative. Yeah, Agenda 2030. And then I found another article. There's a joint venture between the Saudi Industrial Investment Group and Unibio International PLC. They're planning to build what is described as the world's largest single-cell protein production factory in Saudi Arabia. And the factory will use the patented vertical loop bioreactor fermentation technology to convert methane-rich, get this, natural gas into single-cell proteins marketed under the brand Uniprotein.
Okay.
So they're making something that's supposed to be edible out of natural gas.
Hey, they can make urea. Which, at least in that case, urea is a traditional fertilizer.
It is.
Right?
Yeah.
You get your farm animals to pee, you collect it and dump it. Then, of course, they poop balls. That's part of the natural cycle as well.
That's different than natural gas, deriving it from natural gas.
Right.
Yeah,
no, this is clearly an attempt to be able to synthesize.
Yes. Unnatural processes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
in products.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so not only is this engineered shortage happening, but it's also about control. I want to bring up this instance with India because it's already happened. If you don't have biometrics, you're not getting food. The Indian government has already accelerated digital authentication of more than 800 million National Food Security Act beneficiaries who will receive free food grains. And there are many poor people in India. And if you don't submit to this biometrics, you're not getting food. And that's where I see it coming to the US. I know, like we were talking off air, a lot of people aren't feeling that yet, but they're going to, because the fertilizer thing is not new. That was happening with, what was that, Norway?
Mhm.
Wasn't it, a few years ago? And now it's just getting worse. People are starting to see their food go up. The size of the box shrinks, but the price is the same, but that's still an effect. It costs more. Gas prices are increasing. So yes, we aren't on energy lockdowns yet, but we're having to self-lockdown almost because I can't afford those extra 3 gallons of gas. So what do I have to give up? And that's self-censoring.
Yeah, putting people in an untenable position where they're forced to ultimately curtail their own activities rather than the government having to do it overtly, which is actually very smart on the part of the technocrats.
Because you can't blame them for it. You have to
Right.
blame Iran.
I think the American people in general are in for a rude awakening.
Yes.
That was this off air as well? Where you're talking about people that you come in contact with recently who just see that this experience with Iran or our conflict will will just not be that big of a deal.
Yeah, well, that is a major conservative narrative. I know Fox is promoting that narrative, Fox News, that this is probably going to hurt us temporarily, but it's ultimately going to be transitory. It's going to be a blip, and we're going to take out the evil regime in Iran, and ultimately everything's going to go back to winning.
And where have we heard that before? Vietnam, Korea,
Mhm.
Iraq.
Yeah.
It'll just be a flash in the pan. It's just sad.
And I agree, there is going to be a rude awakening because a lot of Americans have had it cushy. Even, I would say, Americans
Absolutely.
who don't have a lot of wealth have had it cushy compared to a lot of other countries.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be more of a shock to us.
Yes.
So people need to be prepared. How do they do that?
So this is your public service announcement that you should grow a garden and don't trust your government.
Well, and on that note, let's finish with a final article that we're linking to here before we begin to close up. That's also relevant to food. And this article basically says that as more farmers, food suppliers, storage facilities, food transportation companies, and grocery stores rely more heavily on AI and technology, they become more susceptible to hacking. And a cyber attack on a major poultry processor in Australia, as an example, has shut down operations, quote, leaving businesses without meat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is something that we're seeing as a contrived threat in multiple domains, the possibility of cyber attacks and hacking, and being able to look yet again at a nameless enemy and say, hey, they're causing these particular problems. And so we have to have a certain response that is inevitably going to result in more government control over our lives.
Absolutely. Less freedoms, more government.
And so ultimately, to sum up for the end of our season wrap up, what we're seeing is multiple ways in which the oligarchs are creating artificial crises to lead us into more government control. We've talked about what's going on with ICE, for example, in recent episodes, and how they are using the immigration situation to create infrastructure where we are going to be brought under more digital control, as well as the building out of this Stasi-like army that is going to be basically at the beck and call of the executive branch. For example, why did they send ICE agents to Italy for the Olympics? What is it about immigration's custom and enforcement that would necessitate their use in that situation? Nothing.
We're
Right?
sending all the ICE agents to, what, 14 airports
Yes.
recently.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, they are immigration enforcement, but not really. Airports aren't their domain.
No. So what we're seeing is ICE's directives being expanded unofficially into all sorts of new areas without much fanfare, without much discussion by anyone. But it's one of those things where once it becomes normalized, it's going to be too late. And at that point, just like we changed the name of the Department of Defense to the Department of War, we can change ICE to the Executive Police,
Oh.
State Police, because everything will then be in
Station.
place.
Mhm.
And on the global stage, we're seeing geopolitically what we're talking about here, this crashing of the global economy in various ways to induce dependence on governments around the world that are going to be coordinating in lockstep, just like we saw with COVID. Now they're going to be doing it with this energy crisis. And at the same time, rolling out this technocratic control grid that is going to be the glue that's going to hold all of this together. And so that is really what the Trump administration has helped to bring about, both at the national level, but also at the international, because of the global role that America plays disproportionately to other countries. And one other thing I want to mention as we close out here is that a lot of people are talking about the beginning of a multipolar world order in which there are no superpowers and there are multiple poles basically keeping each other allegedly in balance through sort of a unofficial check and balance system, but what that's really creating is techniques around the world that are the penultimate stage before we go into a fully centralized global government system.
Well, I would challenge our listeners to really think about, what is your line in the sand? What are you not willing to cross? How are you going to actively keep your freedom and the freedom of your kids and your grandkids? This is something where small community is important.
Community connectiveness. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just thinking exactly the same thing, but I don't know what this looks like. And this has been mentioned by you before too, that it's a spirit, there's a spiritual war aspect to this, and that what we need to do is come together as best we can. We don't need to necessarily see the end from the beginning. We know our creator does that.
Or agree on everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we do need to maintain our connections with community
Mhm.
and do what we can as best as we can.
And really acknowledge that this is happening. And yes, it's scary. Don't live in the fear. And I know everyone has moments of fear. Focus back on what you need to do. Yes, living your life, but not living in a bubble.
Right. Build community, grow a garden. Don't trust your government. Absolutely. Faith over fear. And make freedom your single issue.